So our project is really starting to come together, but a lot of our model elements are still generic. For instance, the roofs, floors, and the walls, except for the curtain walls and the masonry wall, are all generic types. In the next few lessons, we'll customize the roofs, walls, and floors, and we're going to begin with the roof because it's a bit simpler than the walls, and the process is very similar. So I'll begin by selecting the roof and pressing the Edit Type button in the Properties. I'll duplicate this roof type, and keeping with the naming convention, I'll call this new type Generic Custom Shake Roof 12-inch. So this creates a new roof type, and you can see it in the type dropdown. With the new type active, I can now begin making changes to the parameters, just like we saw with windows and doors earlier. Now remember, always duplicate the type before you make any changes to it, so you don't make any accidental changes. I'll begin by editing the structure of the roof. So this takes us to what's called the Edit Assembly dialog box, where you can see the layers of the roof. I'm going to click the Preview button at the bottom to expand the window. Now let's take a look at the Layers box. So right now, the roof has just one layer, a structure layer with no material specified. This is about as generic as you can get, but since we were using the generic 12-inch roof type, we should have expected this. Also notice the core boundary. Remember when we were working with walls and we had choices to use the core center line, the core exterior, the finish face interior, and so on for the location line? Well, the core boundary here is what separates the core layer from the finish layers. And when you have walls with different layers of different thicknesses, this affects where the material is added relative to the location line. I'll come back to this again when we customize the walls in just a bit. So let's give this roof some definition. First, I'll click the function box of the layer. You can see that you can assign different functions for each layer. The available types, structure, finish layers, membranes, air barriers, and such are shown in the drop-down. I'll keep this as a structure layer. Next, I'll assign a material for the layer. I'll click in the material box and browse for a material. The material I'm looking for is structure, wood joist, and rafter layer. I'll select it and click OK. Next, I can adjust the thickness. I want to change the thickness of this layer to 10 inches. When I do, notice the total thickness shown above changes as well. To add another layer, I'll click the Insert button. I'll make this another structure layer. And browse for a material. I'm looking for wood sheathing. All right, plywood will do the trick. And I'm going to make this layer a 1/2 inch thick. When I add the thickness value, notice the preview updates to show the new layer on top of the structure layer. And the total thickness increases to 10.5 inches. Let's add one more layer to the roof. I'll click Insert. Oh, by the way, if you need to delete a layer, just select it and use the Delete button. Very easy. You can use the up and down buttons to reorder the layers. I'll move this new layer up above the core boundary and out of the core. This will make it the outermost layer of the roof. If I moved it down below the core boundary, it would be the innermost layer. I'll make this a finish layer. For the material, I'm looking for roofing, wood shake. Now before I click OK, notice these options over here on the right that I skipped over. These define the properties for the material. Now before making any changes to the material properties, you'll first want to right-click the material and duplicate it to create a new custom material. There are a lot of properties here, and I won't make any changes, but let me show you a few of the more commonly used properties that control the material's appearance. The first is the shading. You can pick the color swatch to choose a color for the material. I'm going to go ahead and leave it at the default brown color that it has. Once you've chosen a color, you can also specify surface patterns or cut patterns. If I click the Surface Pattern drop-down menu, you can see all the different surface patterns available. I'll leave the 6-inch shake pattern, as I don't want to make any changes to my default materials in the library. There's also the Use Render Appearance for Shading checkbox. If I enable it, Revit will use the material's render appearance in the shaded display mode. I'll click on the Render Appearance tab, Here you can see the material's render appearance, hand split shake. There are a lot of options for dealing with render appearances, and generally, I'd recommend leaving them alone while you're still learning the software. One that you should be aware of, however, is the Replace button. This lets me browse for a different rendering appearance from Revit's large rendering appearance library. Like I said, I won't make any changes here. We'll create a custom material for the walls. I just wanted to show you some of the properties while we were in the dialog box, okay? All right, I'll click OK to finally add the material, and I'll give this layer a thickness of 1.5 inches. So this brings our total thickness back to 1 foot like we wanted, and you can see the layers in the preview window. I'll click OK, and the new roof structure is saved. And I can click OK again to choose the roof type for the roof we selected. Finally, I can select the other roof in the workspace and choose the new custom Shake Roof type from the drop-down menu. So now, we've changed both the roofs from generic to custom shake roofs, and we've begun to define the structure in a little more detail.